So recently I went back on the Whatever podcast and it was a 4-hour debate just focused on abortion. So I wanted to break it down for you how it went. It was a bit chaotic. It was 4 hours. It was very loosely structured. And I found out just shortly before the debate that it would be, instead of a panel of a lot of people in support of abortion and opposed to it, that it would be one pro-choicer whose name is Destiny. He's a popular YouTuber named Destiny or Steven. He goes by the name Destiny. In opposition to myself, and then I would be teamed up with a debate partner who had a very different debate style than I do and different arguments. So what ended up happening is there were a lot of interruptions, not only between me and my partner who were having different approaches to the debate, as well as from the opposition. And I think despite 4 hours, there was a good presentation of the pro-life position, but in addition, a lot of chaos. With all of the chaos that ensued, with all of the interruptions, I wanted to break it down. What was the pro-abortion side? What was their position? What's the pro-life response? And then talk through what I see as the weaknesses in the pro-choice position during the debate. So Destiny's argument in the debate is effectively this, that if you have consciousness, if you're a human being with consciousness that's developed that, which you generally do according to him between 20 to 24 weeks of pregnancy, then you are a person. And if you are a person, then you get legal protection and you have human rights. So basically, personhood gives you your rights, and personhood is not all humans, it's humans starting at their consciousness. And he's opposed, therefore, to abortions after 20 weeks because he says roughly that's when a human gets consciousness and becomes a person. Let's hear him state this himself.
My basic stance is we try to figure out what is a person, what makes a person. Person is granted some positive, some negative rights by governments, and probably morally and ethically separate from governments, we also grant people some type of right. I don't believe that a person is a collection of cells. I don't believe that a person is just a body with a brain. I think that very specifically when we speak about a person, we speak about something that has the capacity to deploy a conscious experience, because that tends to be the thing that we're usually talking about when we're figuring out if somebody's alive or dead, or whether or not somebody ought to be protected. When we say a person, when we say who is suffering, we don't say what is suffering. When I try to think of abortion, I try to think of who is being harmed. I would say that for 20 to 24 weeks, that's about when the scientists say that the brain has all the parts necessary to begin communicating, to have a conscious experience, that about at that point, there is some experience there that we can speak of as a who or as a person. But prior to that, the first trimester, that really experience is not happening yet. So if you want to have an abortion, there is no who that's being harmed. There's just a what, which is whatever the body is up to that point. So generally, I'm pro-choice, the first abortion, up until that conscious experience has been formed, because I think that's what's worth protecting, because that's when we look to see when somebody's dead. So that's what we should look to see when somebody's alive.
So are you anti-abortion after 20 or 24 weeks?
Yeah, after 20 to 24 weeks.
And all abortions, anti-all abortions after 20 to 24 weeks?
With the obvious exceptions of like ectopic pregnancies or life of the mother or something like that being threatened, yeah.
By the way, it's kind of interesting here that he mentions ectopic pregnancies, because ectopic pregnancies happen before 20 weeks. So they would not be, I think, an exception for a later term abortion, as he's sort of stating it here. They're happening in the earlier trimester. And the removal of a baby in an ectopic pregnancy is not an abortion procedure. It's not an abortion, because in that case, the baby's in a hostile environment and cannot grow, cannot survive. And the ethical way is to remove part of the fallopian tube with the baby in it, because that would lead to the baby's death, to leave the baby there and potentially the mother's death as well. So the pro-life side and actually the pro-abortion side agree that an ectopic pregnancy is not an abortion. Okay, so what I want to start with here, that aside, what I want to start with here is where we actually agree. So there actually is some agreement here between the pro-life position and Destiny's position. I want to call those out. This, by the way, is not true for all people who are pro-abortion. Some pro-abortion folks are for abortion for any reason through all 9 months of pregnancy at any time. That's not Destiny's position. He takes a more limited position. So where we agree, first of all, is that abortion should be illegal after 20 weeks. Totally illegal. Pro-life side 100% believes that, and it appears that Destiny believes that too. So it sounds like Destiny and our side is opposed to the Democratic Party's platform, which is that abortion should be permitted through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason. In addition, later in the debate at one point, Destiny says that bodily autonomy is a bad argument for the pro-choice side. He says that bodily autonomy does not give you the right to kill another human being. And I thought that was really compelling, because that's certainly agreed. We agree with that on the pro-life side, that your bodily autonomy, which you do possess to a degree, doesn't give you the license to kill another body inside your body when you're pregnant, or to kill your offspring as a parent. So he basically says that the bodily autonomy argument does not apply if the human in the womb is a person. If the human in the womb is not a person, then whatever argument you want to use applies because it doesn't matter. We can kill a pre-conscious human. Another place of common ground where Destiny and I agree is that it doesn't matter how the child is conceived, that child still deserves protection. Of course, when he says child, he means 20 weeks and onward. When I say child, I mean any human who's a child. But we agree that even in cases of rape and of cases of sexual violence, it's not okay where a child is conceived. It's not okay to kill that baby who is conceived. And Destiny actually brought up the extreme circumstance of an 11-year-old rape survivor who was a victim of abuse and who's pregnant, who gets pregnant and is, 22 weeks pregnant or whatever. And it's not okay, Destiny would say, to do an abortion on that baby. That baby is innocent. And he even went as far as saying we should put the 11-year-old child in jail if she tries to pursue an abortion, which I thought was extreme for other reasons. We can get into that in a moment. But the point here is the pro-life and the pro-life side and Destiny's side agrees that no matter how the child was conceived, at least post 20 weeks, it's never justified to take that child's life.
The easiest question in the world. No, you shouldn't be allowed to have an abortion.
You should not what?
No, of course not. If it's already a baby, why the fuck would you have an abortion? Just because somebody's younger is going to be dramatically inconvenienced for 7-8 months or whatever.
Well, we
doesn't mean
agree
you kill
on
a baby.
something, it sounds like. Another place, surprisingly, where Destiny and I agree is in the case of criminal penalties for those that intentionally and willfully pursue abortion. So this is another clip that I want to share, but this is ultimately women who pursue abortion for their children with full agency and full knowledge. So there's not coercion, there's not pressure, there's not ignorance, but they know what they're doing. They're going in with full intent to kill that child. Destiny and I are in agreement that there should be criminal penalties.
If you believe that abortion is murder, then a woman should be held morally responsible for a conspiracy to commit murder if she goes to an abortion clinic. Full stop. End of discussion. If you think abortion is murder, a woman going to get an abortion would be the same as a woman going to get her 1-year-old child killed. If abortion is murder, it's murder for everybody involved, including the woman. Yeah.
So there you can see Destiny is stating that, yes, there should be criminal penalties for those that pursue abortion with full agency and full knowledge. And just because they're a woman doesn't mean they get off the hook for that. And another area where Destiny and I agree is that it's not okay to kill someone because they might suffer in the future. And we both, an example of this that's commonly used is foster care, that if someone is going to be in foster care, therefore they may suffer, then it would be better off if that person did not exist. It would be okay to kill that person before birth. That was another area where Destiny agreed that would be wrong.
For the pro-lifers, if an enslaved African-American woman in the 1800s unalived their fetus to protect the fetus from an enslaved life, would that be immoral?
So like a mercy killing.
Yeah.
Is the way that they would probably see it.
I think kind of so, yeah.
And I think, yes, killing someone because...
immoral.
Yeah, it's immoral. It's killing someone because they are going to be enslaved or have a bad life is not right. We should instead work to free them and get them a better life instead of end their life.
Gotcha.
For the no, this is a argument. You can't make arguments in favor of abortion by killing people that might have shitty lives. It's the stupidest argument in the world. You would never take a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old.
The value of going through what we just went through is argumentative clarity, because the reality is that Destiny seems to fully agree with the pro-life side if the baby is considered a person. And for him, that's, again, 20 to 24 weeks and in utero. So for him, all the pro-life arguments apply, provided that the human is a person. So my debate with Destiny is over when a human being becomes a person. And the pro-life position is that all human beings are persons. We become human and persons at the moment of fertilization. Destiny's position is that it's at 20 weeks. Here is why his argument fails. Some of the arguments I'm going to share were made during the debate, so we're going to revisit them. And then I'm going to present some new arguments that I'm going to have more time and space to lay out and unpack here that we didn't have during the 4-hour debate. Destiny's consistency about abortions being permitted before 20 weeks but not after leads to some very horrific conclusions. For example, at one point during the debate, Destiny said that it would be totally fine for somebody to have repeat abortions on a baby at 19 weeks, so 1 week before consciousness, for reasons of a sexual fetish. If consciousness is everything to you and anything you do before a child is conscious or a human is conscious in the womb is totally fine, would it be morally acceptable for somebody to, maybe that was like some fetish they had or something, intentionally get pregnant, and this has actually happened horribly, intentionally get pregnant to intentionally get abortions, but they're doing the abortions at 19 weeks. So a fully formed fetus can feel, and you're okay if that person gets abortion after abortion. It's totally morally. So
Children,
I could have 30 abortions.
30, you could have 35.
A 19-week-old baby.
Unlimited abortions, however many your body can produce.
And you think it's completely morally acceptable?
Yep, 100%.
Okay, well, it is a consistent position.
Well, let's try to get through some of these
It's
chats.
terrific. Okay, so here's why life doesn't begin at consciousness. There were two main moments from the debate that I think I got him on this question. The main point at which I think I defeated his argument is on the precise definition of death, because he said that death is the cessation of brain activity and therefore the beginning of life meaning personhood for the human is the beginning of brain activity, which again, he says between 20 and 24 weeks. Death is defined as the complete and irreversible cessation of brain activity.
Sure.
That's not the same to say that if that's the definition of death, a child weeks before consciousness at 20 to 24 weeks in the womb doesn't have that definition of death.
It doesn't even have the brain activity.
But it doesn't
Child has
have
brain
irreversible and it doesn't have a cessation of brain activity that will never come back. It's going to develop its brain activity
Going to develop.
shortly.
I agree.
A child has brain
It will develop.
waves
And once it
within the
develops
first
it, I'm going to care a
within
whole
the
lot
first
about
Do
it.
you see that even your definition of, well, I'm defining it the same way that death is defined, they're not the same. Do you see that?
No.
You don't see that.
You could have a
That when
definition
you-
of
when
going
you
broke is when you lose all of your money. But guess what? You're also broke. If you don't have any money, you don't get any
He
money.
has a new definition of death.
Death can be ascertained by the complete and irreversible cessation of brain activity. So at that point, that's when maybe you take the patient off a coma, or you find your person, they have a heart attack, they died, they lost blood flow to their brain, and they have a complete and irreversible cessation of brain activity. Slowly, they will have organ failure, their body's going to start to decay, they are dead. So this is not everything that death is, but this is how death can be determined. So death isn't determined ethically at the lack of consciousness, because you can have complete cessation of brain activity, but it's reversible, and so you're still alive, and it would be wrong for you to be killed. So the complete and irreversible cessation of brain activity does not describe preborn children, living preborn children. Preborn children are not corpses. A 19-week-old living fetus is not a corpse. They are a 19-week-old living fetus. Now, part of the debate we got into when it is ethical to remove a patient from life support. Now, this does not mean that we should keep coma patients alive indefinitely using extraordinary medical care. The reality is that depending on resources and depending on how extreme and how long the injury is, how extreme the injury is and how long they've been in a coma, it can be ethical to remove a patient from life support. And this was also discussed in the debate. I talked about the difference between extraordinary and ordinary medical care. But there's a huge difference between withdrawing extraordinary medical care in a severe case versus removing natural care, ordinary care, and killing somebody. So if we don't think someone is going to wake up from a coma, and if our resources are limited, it can be ethical to remove somebody from life support and allow them to naturally die. The removal of extraordinary medical care can be ethical and is different from killing somebody. If they're receiving natural care, like they're receiving food and water, it would be unethical to remove food and water from a patient, especially if that's not considered extraordinary care. The reality is, withholding extraordinary and artificial medical care is not direct and intentional killing. A child who's in the womb has the right to nourishment from his or her mother, and expelling that child prematurely from that mother's womb would be direct and intentional killing of that child, because receiving nourishment from your mother is not extraordinary and artificial medical care. The second argument where I think I showed his standard doesn't work was this.
For a sleeping person, when you go to sleep tonight, you have had a whole subjective experience right now. When you wake up, that experience will resume. But a baby hasn't even begun to
Destiny,
exist
what if
yet.
I have amnesia and I don't remember anything? I'm like a brand new first moment of consciousness human being. And during my coma, I lose all memory. I lose all sense of my personhood. And when I emerge from my coma, I am like a brand new baby. Would it have been okay during that coma to kill me?
Oof, I would have to think a lot about that question.
Right? So if a person is guaranteed to wake up from their coma, and upon waking up, they're not going to have any of their memories, they're not going to have any of their sense of their personhood or self, would it be okay to kill them? Of course not. So here's a question that I would like to ask Destiny if we were to debate again. Is there any other case where you would be okay with killing someone who is guaranteed to have future consciousness? Because of course, that's the embryo or the fetus before 20 weeks. If not, and abortion, according to him, is totally unique, and so it doesn't fit the question I just asked, then it sounds like Destiny is just arguing that abortion is okay, because abortion is okay. All right, here are some other arguments that I would make in hindsight if I were to debate destiny again. So there's a lot going on in our brains besides our conscious experience. Think about the reality of the subconscious. And at any given moment when we are using our brains, we're only using a very small part of our brains. So the reality is there's a lot more to our experience or our reality as human beings than whatever is happening in our consciousness. And those other parts of our brain have a big impact on who we are beyond the part of our brain that we are actively using. And get this, brain waves are detectable in a preborn child, not at 20 weeks, but at 6 weeks from fertilization, incredibly early. So why do those brain waves not matter to destiny? So all this is why you can't use level of consciousness or degree of brain development to prove personhood and to prove protection from lethal violence. I would have also distinguished between natural capacity and active capacity. This was sort of touched on in the debate, but there was never really time to flesh out the difference between these two ideas. Trent Horn also mentioned this in his response video. He used the terms natural and immediate capacity. But what's the difference? A natural capacity is something that I have because I'm going to develop it, So I have a natural capacity as a human being for language, but when I'm a newborn, I don't have language yet, right? But if I have an active capacity, it means I've developed that capacity and I'm using the capacity for language. Similarly, a fetus who is before 20 weeks has a natural capacity for consciousness. Given time and nourishment, they will experience consciousness, but before 20 weeks, they don't. And then after 20 weeks, they begin to have early stages of consciousness. A rock has neither natural or active capacity for consciousness. So if something has a natural capacity for something, then they possess it and they should be protected. There's another argument that I would have spent more time on with destiny. So he has to clarify that it is not consciousness itself that makes personhood, but that it's the capacity for active consciousness that makes for personhood. This is an important distinction because the preborn child does have the capacity for consciousness that is not active yet. It is natural, but later on will develop active consciousness. And of course, destiny doesn't want to say, well, you go in and out of personhood when you go in and out of consciousness, right? He wants to say, well, provided you had this conscious experience before you go unconscious, then you are a person. However, this presents a problem for destiny. What if someone temporarily loses their capacity for consciousness due to brain damage? And they also lose the underlying structure for consciousness, because at one point Destiny was saying, well, if someone's unconscious but they have the underlying structure for consciousness, then they're a person. But what if you're a person and you're a 20-year-old, you lose your underlying structure for consciousness because of severe brain damage, but then through a healing process that your brain undergoes, or you get some medical technology, you heal that brain. Is it okay, Destiny, to kill that person when they had the severe brain damage and they lost that underlying capacity, as you call it, for consciousness? Another point in the debate that I thought revealed the cruelty of the position of destiny was when we discussed baby Jaxon. Baby Jaxon had an extreme case of hydrocephalus, which led to him not being able to develop 80% of his brain. Doctors said that within weeks after he was developing as an embryo, his brain actually stopped developing. And yet, baby Jaxon lived to be 5 years old, enjoyed the love and care of his parents, and is a beautiful human being and child that should not be killed. According to Destiny's position, it would be okay to kill Jaxon at 3 years old or 4 years old because he lacks the brain capacity and is not fully a person. Okay, at another point in the debate, Destiny talks about moral intuition. He says, generally, we have a moral intuition for what it means to be a person. Moral intuition is simply too vague. We can't go off of our feelings to figure out whether or not it's okay to kill somebody. There has to be bright lines of morality about what is right and what is wrong. Morality is natural law, and natural law is the harmony between human nature and the external world, the natural order. It's conducive to certain universal goods, which are important for holistic human flourishing or happiness. The reality is human flourishing or happiness is actually not subjective, it is objective. Short-term pleasure can be subjective, but long-term happiness is objective. There's something that's objectively good for human beings. Abortion violates the natural law. It violates the moral order. It's a violation of human nature, and it's a violation of some of our most fundamental and basic human rights. Abortion is inherently disordered, and therefore it is wrong. Again, the pro-life position is simple. If you are a human, you are a person. And it is always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human. I heard from the Whatever podcast shortly after the debate about doing a rematch with Destiny, which I said I'm open to doing. I think Destiny's going to be debating other pro-life people as well. I think this is great. I want to say thank you to Destiny for being willing to have the conversation in the debate. I think that is great. Anytime that any pro-choice person is willing to have a conversation and engage with the pro-life side, I think that is good. And I've seen a lot of eyes opened when those conversations happen. Thanks all again. I'll see you next time.